Hi, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. I want to bring you a follow up message for the one we did last week. So, this one is marriage part two. And this one is going to dive into more of roles and obligations within a marriage. So, last week we kind of talked about basically what is marriage, why you would even pursue it, and the parameters of divorce. So, this one is going to focus much more on our roles. We're actually going to start with the exact same verse that we started with last week, just to kind of establish our baseline, and then we're going to kind of get into a couple verses that are um, clearly define what our roles are supposed to be. So let's start in Genesis 2:23 and 24. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." Okay, so one flesh, again, just like we talked about last week, it is that uh, unification, and you're doing so before God. Therefore, it is a permanent pact and vow that everything you do from that point on, you do as partners, as one flesh. All right, so now let's go to 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. And so, what this is going to give us is basically a definition of what is love. What does it mean to love? Because the following verses are going to have many commands of love your wife, love your husband. Like, breaking that down, what does that actually mean? The word love is it's used so frequently that it feels like it has lost its power and its symbolism and its definition. So that's kind of what I wanted to get into just prior to us actually diving into the roles. So that's 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. 13, 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. So you can mark this or come back to it, whatever you need to do. But when you see or hear the word love, that's what it's referring to. All right, so the first one that we're actually going to start with that clearly defines what our roles are supposed to be within our marriage is Ephesians. And so we're going to go to Ephesians 5:21 through 28. And so this is the first of three verses that we're going to read. And they're all fairly similar, but it'll just kind of further back up what these roles are supposed to be, because they're all similar. So they're demonstrating that it is not just one verse; it is several in the Bible that dictate what our roles are supposed to be. All right, so we're 5:21 through 28. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church, and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Okay, so this is clearly laying out what is supposed to look like within a marriage. So there's three commands here. The first one is an act of mutual submission out of reverence for the Lord, out of reverence for Christ. So what does it mean to do that? What does it mean to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ? That basically means I am giving myself to you the same as you give yourself to me. It is an act of mutual submission. My cares are your cares, and vice versa. I should care more about your feelings than I should my own, and vice versa. Again, it should be an act of mutual submission. So you do it together out of reverence for Christ. So that's the first command here. Our second one is for the wives. So wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. So this is not saying that wives should worship their husbands as you do to the Lord. It's just giving you the figurehead of basically the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. The husband is supposed to be the leader. I mean, it's pretty clear. And again, there's multiple verses that are going to say the same thing. But wives, you have to humble and submit to your husbands. There's some caveats to that. Obviously, they have to be deserving, and again, that mutual submission. There's several caveats to that, and we are going to dive deeper into that momentarily. But I want to get all the verses that are similar out of the way so that we can have an understanding of why I'm saying what I'm saying. Okay, so again, mutual submission. Wives, you are to submit to your husband as the leader, and basically you are the follower. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Husbands, if you're told to love your wife as Christ loved the church, that is an incredibly deep love. That is a sacrificial love. Christ died for the church. So that is the amount of love that is called on you to demonstrate to your wife. So while she is supposed to submit herself to you and follow you, you are to demonstrate a deep love, like love in the sense of what we were talking about in 1 Corinthians for her. And even beyond that, it's supposed to be sacrificial just as Christ loved the church. Both of those are very significant commands because they ask a lot of us. But it does fall into our natural role of masculinity and femininity. Again, we'll get into that momentarily. So let's go to our next verse, and that is going to be 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So this one is saying generally the same thing, but it does have some additional points. So the first one, obviously, is it's saying, again, submission from the wives to their husbands. And then it also goes a little deeper where it's talking about the beauty and sanctity, basically, of the wife is not from how she dresses, whether hair, clothes, jewelry, whatever. That stuff doesn't matter. Her actions and the way she carries herself and presents herself is of much greater value to the Lord. That's the other part of that first verse or first section. Husbands, so basically you're called to be considerate as you live with your wives, and then respectful. Treat them with respect. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. So the first part of that, where it says weaker partner, I presume it means weaker in a biological sense, but the word partner. So again, we're talking about the wives submitting themselves to their husbands, but it is still a partnership, and it should be a mutually beneficial one. It should not be a dictatorship where the husbands are treating their wives as their maid and just bossing them around. That's not what a marriage is supposed to be. If you are to be deserving of their, if husbands, you are to be deserving of your wife's submission, then you have to love her with that sacrificial love that we just spoke about. And as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. Again, just kind of acknowledging that it doesn't necessarily, this isn't a hierarchy. You're still partners. It should still be viewed as such. We just have different roles to fill within that partnership because we're both heirs with the gracious gift of life. We both have the opportunity to go to heaven. We both have souls. We are equal in God's eyes. We just have different roles to fill. Okay, last one, Colossians 3:18 through 19. This one's short and sweet. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Okay, so again, 3 verses saying generally the same thing of our roles within marriage. So the wives are clearly supposed to be the follower and submissive to their husbands. Husbands, you are to be deserving of their submission. And there's several points to that. Biblically, you have to demonstrate a sacrificial love, which is, again, just like we were talking about in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7, is very detailed, and there's a lot to that. You have to be deserving of her submission and earn it, essentially, because, again, it's not supposed to be just a one-sided thing. Marriage is supposed to be mutually beneficial. Leadership in the Bible is also, it's not the way we perceive leadership in our society. Because leadership in our society is more about flexing your power and then lording your authority over the people who are your subordinates or inferiors. That's not what leadership is supposed to be. The example set for us by Jesus was leading by example, leading through service. And he clearly stated we are not to lord authority over others as the Gentiles did. And this is just as true in a marriage. That is not what that's supposed to be. Good leadership, you lead by example and you lead through service. Again, just like we were talking about in the beginning of Ephesians, it's a mutual submission. So I should be, if I want my love language met, then I should meet my wife's love language. I shouldn't just dictate to her that I want her to do more of what I want. I should meet her and fill her cup if I want the same back. It's a mutual thing. Like if you're so focused on what you're not getting out of it, or you get hung up on the little odd things that your spouse may do that you don't like, you're losing sight of the big picture. Are you meeting the same criteria of your role? Are you filling your role to the best of your ability? Are you meeting essentially your spouse's level of love? And obviously that's going to be an answer only you have, because or you and God can have. I don't know that. That would have to be, if you, I guess, want to discuss that, it'd have to be on a very individual basis, because it's going to depend upon your situation, your marriage, your spouse. A lot of different circumstances will be involved with that. But my point being is, marriage is supposed to be a mutually beneficial thing. So if one of you is giving all and the other is not matching that, well, therein lies your issue. And obviously vice versa. Our roles, though, are fairly clearly defined in the Bible. And I think our society has intentionally twisted them around to, okay, this is more, I'm going to give a, this is more of my opinion. This is a little outside of what we're talking about, but I feel like our society has intentionally twisted our roles because it is pushing for men to be more feminine and women to be more masculine. I think that plays into the spiritual warfare that's being waged around us every day. This obviously contradicts that. This contradicts what our society promotes right now. I mean, like it or not, this is the Bible. Like I'm not just, that's why I read 3 verses. This is not just my opinion. This is what is in here. God gave us clearly defined roles, and we should do our best to fill those roles, because it's going to make our marriage smoother and easier, because we're doing what we're designed to do. Granted, I do understand there's going to be circumstances where that may not be possible, Maybe there's personality differences. Maybe only one of you is a believer. I mean, there's multitude of circumstances that are going to inhibit that, and I understand that, and I recognize that. So I'm not saying this is a fix all solution, but this should still be used as a framework for your own marriage. What um, what roles do you fill in your marriage? I mean, if you read this and then compare it to yourself, again, that's only questions that you can answer, but it would be a good moment of self-reflection of what what are the roles as defined in your marriage. Biblically, this is what is before us. This is what we are called to do. So I want to end on basically what marriage is. So marriage, again, I keep saying it, but it is supposed to be mutually beneficial. It should not be men just flexing their power and bossing their wives around. That's not what it's supposed to be. It shouldn't be the opposite, which is what we see in a lot of society now, where it's the masculine woman that tell men what to do. It's not supposed to be that on either side. Biblically, wives are to submit to their husbands. Husbands, you are to be deserving of that and demonstrate a sacrificial love to your wife. That's what marriage is supposed to be. It's supposed to be mutual submission and benefits on both sides. It should not be one sided. Guys, I do hope this was helpful. Um, this was a longer one, and I even left out one verse just for the sake of time, because I don't want to make it over 20-30 minutes. But if you do have time to read it, I can give you the verse. This is on basically basically fulfilling your sexual marital duties to each other. This is the physical aspect of marriage. It's 1 Corinthians 7:1-5, and it is essentially addressing how we, once you're married, your body is not your own, in the sense of basically it's more mutual submission. Same as we read in the beginning of Ephesians, this is just talked about in a physical aspect. So if you do have time, I suggest going to read it, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into that. Guys, I do hope this was helpful. I'm going to close in prayer. Almighty Lord, I thank you for another day. I thank you for my wonderful family. I thank you for the people listening. I ask that you be with us all this week. Help us to represent you well and honor you with our thoughts, our actions, and our words. Help us to treat our spouses accordingly and love them in the way that you would see fit, God. We thank you for the blessing that they are to us, and help us just to honor you with the way in which we love our spouses. In your almighty, powerful Trinity, we pray. Amen. Thank y'all.